Dundinwe Magaduk, Nigon Wewedum, the Dishakos, Namago Shindo, Demni Menwendum, Omayayan. Got a bunch of bungie gis and agwajing, Zikwan agwajing. It's a beautiful day out there here on Treaty 1 territory. And Bojum Numa Shomasak, Nakomasak, Mijana Gijik, Namiji Nibakwe. It's an honor to be here. My name is Nigon Sinclair, and I'm a professor here on Treaty 1 territory at the University of Manitoba. I'm also a columnist with the Winnipeg Free Press, and I do a bunch of other things in the community. Most markedly, I'm Sarah's dad. That's probably my greatest title. So there you go, right there. And so it's nice to be here tonight and for this wonderful roundtable with very inspiring and incredible people who have done just amazing work for our community, and they continue to do so tonight. You're going to meet them in just a minute, but we are just so lucky to be a part of this wonderful event for tonight, and you're going to hear about the sponsors in just a minute as well. I just want us all to consider for just a moment the territories that we are all on. Of course, I am here on Treaty 1 territory, homeland of the Anishinaabe, the Cree, the Ojibwe, the Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, as well as our Dene and Inuit relations who travel down and spend time in this territory as well. And of course, we are in the homeland of the Red River Métis. And so here we are in this beautiful place. I want you to think about all the different people you and communities you share relationships, wherever you are on Turtle Island watching this webinar for tonight. So I want you just to think about that. And when we talk about territorial acknowledgements, most importantly, it's about relationships and responsibilities in those relationships. So to be a treaty person, to be a person that shares territories with Indigenous communities, there are responsibilities to that. There are also responsibilities, most importantly, to the earth, to the water, and to the animals, to all of those beings in the sky and all of our fish relatives. And I want us all just to think about all of our relatives and what we share when we talk about being territorial relatives. So I ask you all just to do that right now, to consider all of those relationships and offer them your gifts. And when I greeted you at the beginning, I called all of our relatives. I called all of our ancestors who are behind us and all of those who have yet to come. I called all of us to come and see this work in a good way for tonight. And so I wish all of you good thoughts in those spaces, and think of those relationships as we go forward in tonight. We have such incredible hosts for tonight, people who have brought this event and worked very hard. I don't know if all of you have seen, but you know, the incredible PR that's been done for this event and the information that's been spread out about. I mean, I was hearing about it all today. And so just a huge congratulations to our two co-sponsors for tonight, the Mama Wichita Center. The name Mama Wichita, for those of you that don't know, translates from Ojibwe into the phrase, we all work together to help one another. And the Mama Wichita Center has been around since 1984, brought together by community people, leaders. I can remember when I was a young boy hearing about the founding of that center. I actually remember being in meetings in the friendship centers way back in the day and hearing about that, talking about how we can support and rebuild families. Since that time, for now going on almost 4 decades, Mama Wichita has worked to support families and better care for children by creating meaningful opportunities for community and family involvement. The key is in our communities is strong families mean strong communities. And so investing in that future is about what Mama Way does. Right today, more than 50 programs are in operation, 11 sites, and 200 staff and volunteers. The incredible work that Mama Way does. So just recognize them and the hard work that they've done to make this event possible for tonight. Our other co-sponsor is an organization called Science Up First. And Science Up First is a national collective of independent scientists, researchers, healthcare experts, and science communicators who should all come together to share the best available information, science in creative ways, and stop the spread of misinformation. They combine expert scientific knowledge with social media to talk about, to dispel myths and to also create engaging content. By putting science first, they inform, delight, and inspire people to make evidence-based decisions. So just a huge miigwech to Mama Way and Science Up First and for bringing us together for tonight. And I want, while you're doing that, while you're thanking these great co-sponsors for tonight, I want you to also send some love and shout outs and good thoughts to all of our healthcare providers who are working so hard. In a column that I wrote for the Winnipeg Free Press about a day and a half ago, what I said was, it's just remarkable to watch maximum capacity institutions who are filled with people who are endlessly going back into the trenches, back into the front lines, like teachers, like our paramedics, like our first responders, and all these different communities. Healthcare providers have been saving lives day in, day out, often without any complaints whatsoever, and have been putting their lives on the line to save all of us. And as someone who's benefited from that, we are all so lucky. And we cannot thank them enough. As I've said a number of times to my family and my friends, we should be having a parade for teachers and first responders and healthcare providers after this pandemic is under control. I just hope that you all, if you have a healthcare provider, excuse me, if you have a healthcare provider in your life, please send love to them. Tell them how much we respect them and that we honor them. And please send that love over to them. We want to start off tonight in a really good way. And so what we want to do is we want to have an opening prayer and a song. And so if you can please join me in welcoming Sarah Delarond, who will guide us in a song that will open up tonight. Sarah, take it away. Wonderful, miigwech, for that beautiful song, Sarah. And just a real, like, I was sitting here just really thinking about how wonderful it is that to begin an event like that. I hope I was unmuted there. Okay, yes, I am. We have a real opportunity tonight to not just spend time with our healthcare providers, but our elders and our knowledge keepers. And so I want to invite and I want to offer this asema to Ed Azir, who is my colleague at the University of Manitoba, who works within the University of Manitoba Master in Social Work program. Ed is Swampy Cree, born and raised in around the Paw, and is a member of Norway House Cree Nation, which of course is the other side of my family. So Ed, I would like to offer you this asema and to offer you that gift so that you can do some, give us some words in a good way to open us up for tonight and offer a prayer for us to begin. So Ed.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Ahamaga. Iminanaskumao. Awagate penimekuak ni ako magantik. Magonigan niwi na naskumawa pagamaski go Sandra paham ito hama nuktawinan samina epepaksemitan mamao nuktawinan tapminan mati nuktawinan homagekwan kawi mam skutama kanutsumagagi Homa haksiwen kap mutem kan misues kami kota. Ay man, mati makwa no tawinan. Iso kamawinan, suwe manan mati. Awinan giatos kehaganak, tepe witsu kumawiak mistawaw. Ano masewat siwen sok, siwen kaskita, wen kakita ko na makwa nege. Mati. Ego sani ma. Ewe paksema wakiatos kehagan no tawinan. Ni masomtek no kumna nakisto mate. Begit mageta. Begwitso kumawinan mate. Ega teganas kumahakok ni ako maganagtat gabet hote chekota. Dependo tahiyak. Mate makwa ni masomtek no kumna. Moe gatski katep naskum tawok. Moe gatski katep naskum tawok. Inigo ke sewat siye. Wichakamawinan. Nagatemenan. Ay, hip meitet tawok mawa. Ay, hip meitet tawok. Nuta. Ay, hip meitet tangista. Ay, hip meitet tanutawinan. Ekusanima. Nigan. Kinekwa.
Miigwech, Ed, for that. We're so lucky to have, working with you at the University of Manitoba and also be a part of tonight's event. And also big miigwech to Sarah as well for that song too. And for everybody that's come tonight. Tonight's session is called Protecting Our Future. It's a discussion on COVID-19, everything related to things like vaccines and health. For our people, it has been going on just over 2 years since I was in a class at the University of Manitoba where this sickness that was emerging in other parts of the world was finally beginning to hear about the ways in which we were going to be impacted here on Turtle Island. And it's pretty remarkable that for 2 years, our people, along with many other nations and cultures and communities that we share these spaces with, have been fighting so hard to keep ourselves healthy and safe during this very tumultuous time. So we're going to have a really productive discussion tonight. We have some great questions that we're going to bring up, and we also invite all of you to give some questions as well and to offer those to each other. And so I just wanted to give you a few different lay of the land here while we begin for tonight. First, you have the option to turn on closed captions with the button on the bottom of your screen. So if you look on the very bottom of your screen, you'll see a closed caption button that you can use. We have closed captioning. And so if you are, just remind all of our panelists tonight, if you can just speak in such a way that our closed captioning can catch up to you. And so I certainly have to remind myself I speak very fast sometimes. Over the past couple weeks, we've collected a number of questions that we're going to use to start things off for tonight. I'll be asking those questions. These are not my questions, although I may give a bit of things that I have been writing about and thinking about, so I may put something in there. But these are questions that have been offered by people who have been interested and engaged and are thinking about this roundtable. We do have an opportunity tonight for you to ask questions as well, too. So if you'd like to ask a question to our panelists, please feel free to use the Q&A option and submit them at any time. And I'll have an opportunity to have those directed to me by our friends at Science Up First. So they'll be handling most of those. We also ask everybody to please be respectful and to be kind. Be mindful that not all of us have the same amount of information at all times, which is why we're here for tonight. And to be kind in your responses to each other. It is our way as Indigenous peoples and for our relatives to be treaty peoples, to be kind to one another and to understand that we all come from different directions. We come to this place with all the different things that we have brought to this place. We'll do our best to answer as many questions as possible for tonight, but let's meet our panelists first. I mean, we are so lucky to have such a diverse panel of people that I either know or I've heard of. And so I've been very excited to meet people that I've not met before, but of course, the people here in Treaty 1, like our first panelist, Dr. Marcia Anderson is Cree Anishinaabe and grew up in the north end of Winnipeg. Her family roots go back to Peguis First Nation, my community, and Norway House Cree Nation, also my community. So we're basically cousins. So I'm introducing my cousin here. She practices both internal medicine and public health as a medical officer of health with Indigenous Services Canada in the Manitoba region. She's also the Vice Dean of Indigenous Health and the Executive Director of Indigenous Academic Affairs in the Ongamazin Indigenous Institute of Health and Healing at the Rady Faculty of Health Sciences, right here at the University of Manitoba. If you don't know about the work Ongamazin does, it is a remarkable place with amazing people. It's something that we in the Department of Indigenous Studies would love to have as in our own Faculty of Arts. It's really led by brilliant leaders like Marcia. She serves as the chair of the Indigenous Health Network of the Association of Faculties of Medicines of Canada and the chair of the National Consortium of Indigenous Medical Education. And of course, naming off all the different awards that you've won, I mean, National Aboriginal Achievement Award, named one of the most powerful women in Canada, someone that I don't mess with when I'm in a meeting. And of course, I really congratulations to you for receiving the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons, Sir Thomas Dignan Indigenous Health Award. So big miigwech and congratulations for that. Our next panelist is Dr. Ryan Giroux. Now, I don't know Ryan, but I've heard of Ryan's work, and Ryan is a general pediatrician working at St. Michael's Hospital in the inner city as Health Associates in Toronto, and is one of 2 Indigenous educators at the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada. He's Métis from the Métis Nation of Alberta, as well as mixed settler heritage. Grew up in rural Alberta prior to completing a Bachelor of Arts in Anthropology in Edmonton and completed medical schools and residency at the University of Toronto. His interests include Indigenous child health, refugee and newcomer health, LGBTQ2S+ health, and medical education. Our next panelist is, of course, you've met him already, Ed Azair, who is my colleague at the University of Manitoba. For those of you that don't know the work that Ed's done, he's been the executive director of the Nelson House Medicine Lodge in Northern Manitoba and has spent a whole career working towards the health and well-being of all of our peoples. Holds various different posts and has worked in areas of alcohol and drug abuse, education and health. Ed's also done numerous workshops, and I've been lucky enough to sit and hear Ed speak in several different times. And of course, I've mentioned before his work in the Master of Social Work at the University of Manitoba in Indigenous Knowledge. Ed also does a great amount of cultural work, supporting our people in ceremonies, and is a father and husband and proud grandfather of 19 grandchildren. Like, what's that about? Making a whole community for yourself. 2 baseball teams. Finally, our last panelist, but certainly not the least, is one of someone I've known the longest on this panel, and I think I might start telling some stories. Why not, eh? Is Dr. Lisa Monkman. I've known Lisa since we were very young in our teenage years, and I've known Lisa since all the great work that she does. She's an Anishinaabe family physician with tons of experience in rural and urban settings. I don't know if you get a chance to ever hear Lisa. Lisa does some great work in our communities and commutes, especially during those hard winter nights. And so if you get a chance to see just endless work within the front lines in our communities, is a graduate of the University of Manitoba, founded an outreach clinic in Swan River, Manitoba, and has done work in HIV and hepatitis C infections. Is currently traveling to Broken Head, as I mentioned before, operating a medical clinic there, and is a founding board member of the Indigenous Physicians Association of Canada. And so, if I'd listed off all the different things that you do, Lisa, we'd be here for quite a long time because just your work that you do is so remarkable. And big miigwech to everybody for coming for tonight. Please, everybody join me in a little raising our hands or applauding or whatever it is that you do to welcome our panelists for tonight. Let's get started. The first question is for Dr. Giroux or Ryan. Ryan, I haven't yet met you, but I look forward to hanging out with you. And when next time come through Treaty 1 territory or whatever else, next time I'm in Toronto occasionally, hopefully we can hang out a little bit. But the first question that we have here is certainly one that's in a lot of people's mind right now. Can you talk a little bit about mRNA vaccines? Were they used before COVID-19? And are they genetic gene therapy? And how do we know they're safe? Because right now, Pfizer is conducting many different trials, currently phase 3, meaning that there's a lot of information that's being spread about the Pfizer vaccine, as well as other mRNA vaccines. Can you just quickly tell us, are they safe, and were they used before?
For sure. I just want to say thanks so much for having me. It's great to be far away, but so close to where my ancestors are, have come from before. I wanted to just focus on a couple of different pieces that you asked. So when we think about mRNA, that's something called messenger RNA, and it's kind of like half a strand of DNA. mRNA wasn't actually discovered until around the 1960s. And then science on using mRNA in healthcare was first thought of, first conceptualized really in the 1980s. And then in 2013 and 2015, the first clinical trials of using mRNA vaccines were used for rabies and for influenza. So the COVID-19 vaccines that we're using, the mRNA version, the mRNA COVID vaccines, are the first kind of widespread mRNA vaccine used across the world. And certainly we are dealing with that today. So how it kind of works, I think people sometimes want to know what it actually does. And this question on gene therapy, I'll try and explain how an mRNA vaccine works. And certainly if my colleagues have any other way of explaining this, happy to hear it. So the mRNA that is in the vaccine it contains instructions on how your body can produce something called a spike protein. So the spike protein is then pushed onto the surface of different cells in your body, so all made up of different cells. And it's when the spike protein is on the cells, then your body recognizes it as something that's not normal. So it recognizes it being foreign. And then that's what creates an immune response and creates your immunity towards it, which is the same immunity that you would get if you would fight off a COVID-19 virus, because the virus also expresses that same spike protein. So the mRNA doesn't actually change your genetic makeup. It doesn't change your DNA. It actually can't even get to the part of your cell, the center of the cell where your DNA is. So it wouldn't be considered a gene therapy. And we know that the mRNA that we put in the COVID vaccine, that's in the COVID vaccine that goes into a person, it actually degrades within a few days. And then the spike proteins that are created from the mRNA only stay for about a few weeks. So it's very, I hope that kind of gives a good sense of like how this actually works. And then the phase 3 trial. So my understanding is that Pfizer's initial phase 3 trial actually ended in November 2020. So it's actually their phase 3 trial has been gone for quite some time, and they're now in like kind of a phase 4. So post, how would you say, like once it's given broader to the public, they're kind of doing post-vaccine monitoring. There is an ongoing trial right now that's looking at the age 6 month to 4 year age group. And I believe that's the most active phase 3 trial yet, because that hasn't been made available for widespread use. And they haven't been licensed. They have to do a lot of different things in these trials. They have to make sure that they're safe. They have to make sure that they're working. And the most recent data suggests that it's safe in this group, but that it doesn't work as well as it does with older children or adults. So we're still kind of waiting on more information from that trial. And that's why the vaccine isn't available for the 6 month to 4 year age group. I hope that answers the question, and Dr. Anderson, Dr. Monkman, any other pieces would be greatly appreciated.
No, that's great. I mean, I think generally what I would like to address for tonight is why are people like what are the major issues? And I hope that all of our panelists at some point answer what are the major concerns that people have around vaccines. And what's the most frequent way that you're addressing it? And so you certainly did that, Dr. Giroux, so miigwech for that. We're going to jump over to Dr. Anderson. Of course, I've heard you give this answer before on the weekly Friday panels that you've been doing with the Grand Chief and with part of the Indigenous Health Network. I mean, just what a tremendous information that is for anybody gets a chance to hear those information panels. Just what a valuable thing for our communities. Many of our people in our communities have concerns with heart palpitations or impacts of the vaccine on your heart. And I think many of our people have heart issues, and so they're concerned that the question here is, what is the impact of the vaccine on our hearts? And how do I know that it's safe? Will the vaccine make any of my issues around my heart worse?
Yeah, it's a great question. And in my internal medicine practice, I really only see patients with heart problems. So this kind of brings both of my areas of, interest and expertise together. So, what I would say, first of all, and building a bit on what Dr. Giroux was able to say, is that phase 4 or post-marketing surveillance, like it's really important to understand that more than 11 billion doses of COVID vaccine have been given worldwide. Over 80 million of those have been given in Canada alone. And because we have such rigorous adverse event reporting, we know that only about 8,500 odd serious adverse events have happened, which is like 0.01 roughly percent. So overall, these vaccines are very, very safe. Of course, one of those serious side effects is a heart side effect, and that's the risk of myocarditis or pericarditis. And that refers to inflammation of the lining around the heart or the heart muscle itself. One of the symptoms could be chest pain or shortness of breath or potentially heart palpitations. Now, the thing to know is that is less likely to happen in the patients I see, who tend to be older adults with pre-existing heart disease. Actually, it tends to be younger people, people who maybe were born and assigned male at birth or have those higher post-pubertal testosterone levels, right? There seems to be some kind of interaction there. And so outside of that group, the risk of this heart inflammation is really, really low. So it's very unlikely, actually, if say you had a heart attack in the last few years, that the vaccine would do anything to your heart. And I'll just note too that even in the highest risk group for that heart inflammation, the myocarditis or the pericarditis, the risk is like in the neighborhood of 1 in 10,000. And it goes down in other age groups with different testosterone exposures. Now, the other thing that I'll note, because it's always important to keep in mind, there's the risk of side effects from the vaccine. And like we've just talked about, that's very low when it comes to these serious adverse events. There are more common side effects like having a fever, headache, or sore muscles. The risk of very serious side effects is low, like I've just described. The risk of having side effects or other symptoms other than lung involvement or nose involvement or sore throat from COVID is higher than the risk of having those effects from the vaccine. So you're more at risk of having heart complications if you actually get COVID than you are if you get a COVID vaccine. You're more at risk of having a blood clot if you get COVID infection than if you get a COVID vaccine. So it's really important that we keep those risks in mind, because whenever we're making these decisions, we're trying to balance off the risks of doing something versus the risk of not doing something and the potential consequences of that.
Miigwech for that, and especially the clarification, because I often hear that people are concerned when it has to do with that heart condition, and people want to talk about that impact of that sickness. Or the impact of the vaccine. And certainly, when I got my shot, I had a sore arm. And so it's a very real feeling. And I think a general real concern that people have, but it's good to hear that there's almost little to no worries whatsoever. And also that there's very little to no, what did you call, high adverse events? Or what was the word that you used there?
Yeah, the serious adverse events,
serious
right?
event, yeah.
So the side effects are common and they can be pretty uncomfortable. I had pretty significant side effects, so I'm not going to lie, and I don't want to minimize that. But the risk of serious adverse events like the heart inflammation or the blood clots that some of us heard about or might remember from AstraZeneca, for example, the risk of those serious side effects is very low, in the neighborhood of 0.01%.
We want to jump over to Ed for a moment here. I mean, Ed, you've been working with our communities for such a long time, but most recently been working with people on the general fatigue, the impacts of COVID. What do you see are the mental, emotional, and spiritual impacts of COVID on our people, but also the ways in which the pandemic has impacted the fact that, you know, many of us don't see one another as much anymore. Our ceremonies have been interrupted. You know, just simple effects like holidays are very different now. What do you see as the major impacts on our people?
Thank you very much, Nigan. The ones that I feel most sorry for are our youth. As you know, our youth, they were used pre-pandemic. They were used to getting around. There was a lot of freedom. The restrictions that came with COVID really shut down their mobility. And in our communities, especially when we went into lockdown, Nelson House went into lockdown. A small host of communities, northern Manitoba, went into lockdown. And in our northern communities, the internet is not the greatest. So you have poor connectivity, internet connectivity up there, plus the restrictions in with COVID. What's the best way to put it? Our youth became housebound. It created a lot of depression. They were really impacted mentally. I would say it was the most serious impact for our youth in our community. Spiritually, I think our people have, even with colonization, the impact on our spirituality, our spiritual practices was impacted. We don't tend to have a whole lot of faith in our own beliefs, in our own practices, our own remedies, our own treatments. I will say that throughout the pandemic here in down south in southern Manitoba, I run sweat lodges, and I've run those throughout the pandemic. And I'm saying this not to brag or boast, and I know I'm putting myself out on the limb here, but I do so. I do so with the full knowledge that this is a very public event. And what I will also say is that with the ceremonies that I've maintained down here, Cree ceremonies, they come with our own medicine, our own prayers, our own songs. And throughout the past 2 years, our ceremonies we continued doing them, even at the height of shutdown. So and it's not for any slip-ups by our security people out at the university. No, it's my own belief in our spiritual practices and our medicines. For example, I use a medicine that was given to our people some 40 years ago, because as you intimated, Nigan, our ancestors foresaw the coming of these kinds of diseases, and medicines were gifted to us in ceremony. And that's one of the medicines that I use. And I will say this, that not a single individual has walked away from my sweat lodge and having contracted COVID. That's significant for me, because I'm hoping through that small revelation that there will be growing acceptance of our ancestral practices. Emotionally, it's depressing. COVID is a depressing ailment, and you can see it in our communities, especially in our care homes. You know, the elders, while the measures that were taken to forestall the spread of COVID, especially in our care homes on the reserve, it helped to contain that virus. You know, and I congratulate the health staff on the reserves, the leadership on the reserves. But I had my mother-in-law. There's many elders in these personal care homes who became desperately lonely because of the restrictions. Their loved ones on the reserve couldn't even go and visit them. You could see them through the windows, maybe. No physical contact. So those impacts were very real, very pronounced, and but all in all, I think managed quite well.
You know, in our creation stories, all of our communities have stories about sickness, as you point out. And you know, in all of those creation stories, our solutions are caring for each other more, looking after each other more, being more kind, being more generous. And that's the solution to all of our creation story sicknesses. And certainly we saw that within our communities now. I've been asked to read this question directly. This is for Dr. Monkman, so I'm going to read the exact wording of this question. I'm pregnant. And so the first question I would like to ask to you, Dr. Monkman, is how did that happen? But I'm pregnant and I haven't gotten vaccinated. How do I know it's safe for me and my unborn baby?
Bonjour, miigwech for the question. I myself recently had a baby and I'm currently breastfeeding. And I, take care of lots of pregnant moms and newborn babies. And so I feel like I can answer this question well. I cannot stress enough how important it is to know that the vaccine is safe in pregnancy and in breastfeeding. There were no safety concerns identified in a study of more than 35,000 pregnant people who received an mRNA COVID-19 vaccine within 30 days of conception. And so pregnant people can get vaccinated and should get vaccinated at any time during pregnancy or while breastfeeding. And the other important piece I just want to highlight is that COVID-19 vaccines, like the mRNA from the vaccines, do not transfer into the breast milk, but the passive immunity that the mom confers to the baby is absolutely real and present. So breastfeeding moms can absolutely protect their newborn breastfeeding nursing babies by getting vaccinated and passively transferring protective antibodies to the baby. So absolutely 100%, you are pregnant, please get vaccinated. It's the best thing for you, it's the best thing for the baby, and it's the best way to stay healthy out of hospital and in your own home.
Well, partly answered. I'm just but no, miigwech for that. Certainly, I think that's a real genuine concern, especially that, there's just so much information there about mothering and about parenting. As a parent myself, I had lots of genuine concerns about the vaccine. I've also had concerns about other vaccines way before the pandemic, but after reading research and talking to our physicians and our knowledge keepers, certainly it's been valuable. And my daughter is fully vaccinated in all the different ways. We have a series of video questions now. So the first one is for you, Dr. Giroux.
Hi, my name's Katie. As a university student, I've heard a lot from my peers that if you're young and healthy and at a low risk of getting a serious illness due to COVID-19, then there's no point in really getting vaccinated. Is this true, or are there other risks involved for someone around my age?
That is a very excellent question. It was nice to see someone ask the question face to face. So, and it's definitely one that I know I hear a lot in my practice. So I work mostly, I'm a pediatrician, so I work with people under 18, but I also work at Adoje Minunasewinong, which is the Place of Healthy Breathing, which is our Indigenous focused COVID vaccine and testing center, one of them in Toronto. So I definitely see folks of university age coming in and asking similar questions. So, I think there's kind of three. So it's true that if someone is young and healthy and they contract COVID, there is a low risk of them developing a serious outcome, such as being in the ICU. But I still think there's kind of three main categories of things to consider when getting the vaccine. And it really for me falls into kind of for yourself, for those around you, the people that you love, and then for the future are kind of the three main things that I think about. So for ourselves, so many children, adolescents, young adults are at low risk of developing these serious consequences. Most of them will just experience the symptoms of a flu. But we can never really guarantee that the risk is zero for developing a serious consequence. There are young people who have experienced significant illnesses, like having to be admitted to the ICU, needing a breathing tube, and lots of other things that come with when someone is really unwell. And the COVID vaccine really is there to help prevent that. We know that someone who has gotten the COVID vaccine is much, much, much less likely to be admitted to hospital or the ICU compared to someone who gets COVID and doesn't have the vaccine. Specifically for children and adolescents, and I know this is a university age person asking me this question, but my pediatrician brain can't really turn it off all the time. So for children and adolescents, there's a COVID-related disorder called MIS-C, so multisystem inflammatory syndrome temporally caused by COVID, MIS-C. And so a number of studies have shown that right now youth who are admitted with MIS-C have about a 1 in 3 chance of being admitted to the ICU, especially if they're unvaccinated. And we know that COVID vaccines are one thing that help prevent this in the youth. And there's ongoing studies right now that are looking at MIS-C and vaccines in the 5 to 11 year age group. I know from my own practice, so it's been 2 years for the COVID, for this pandemic. And I was a resident for part of that working at Sick Kids. And certainly during parts of the pandemic where the waves were bad, we were seeing MIS-C admissions all the time. We had a whole ward really for it. So it is not something to mess with. It's something that really does, can lead to really significant consequences, even for otherwise healthy children. So that's kind of the for yourself. Next is kind of for those around you. So there's others around many of us that may not be so lucky to have good health for lots of different reasons. And some of those may be our older family members or elders. Some of those people may have health conditions that prevent them from being able to get the vaccine, or have conditions that mean the vaccine doesn't work as well for them. And one way we can protect our families and those in our communities is to be vaccinated and reduce the risk of transmission between people. And this is in it's many ways that we can do this. Vaccine, I think, is probably the most effective way of doing it, but we can do other things like using masks, washing our hands, isolating when we're not feeling well, and things like that. So it's really about protecting our communities and our families. And then the last piece, this talk is called Protecting Our Future. So I definitely have to bring up the future. So I think we all know that this pandemic has been incredibly, incredibly unpredictable. So for example, back in November before Omicron, there were lots of people who thought we were over the worst of the pandemic, everything was going to be fine. And then Omicron spread across the world and led to many people getting infections, and people who were unvaccinated at that time didn't have enough time to be able to get their vaccine, because your primary series of the vaccine takes anywhere from about 5 to 6 weeks to be considered fully vaccinated. And then you're at higher risk because of it. So suffice to say, we just don't know where this pandemic is going to take us. Maybe Dr. Anderson does, I don't. but there may be another variant like the BA2 variant that comes along and could be worse than previous variants. And my take on this is the best way to protect ourselves is to be prepared, and the vaccine is the most effective way to do that based on what we know right now. So those are the three ways that I kind of talk about that question. Is the pandemic over? No, I don't think it is. And I think Dr. Anderson might have something to say about that too.
We'll throw to you to add to that, Dr. Anderson, but we have a video question for you. So we're going to give you the two, and they're both the video question, and feel free to pick up on what Dr. Giroux had to say there. So video question for Dr. Anderson.
Hi, I'm Shelly. I'm wondering if after getting double vaccinated and you have COVID, if there's a recommended wait time between getting your third dose.
Okay, that's a great question. So maybe I'll do that question first, and then I can build on Dr. Giroux's answer. So there's two ways of looking at this, right? And so first of all, there is an official recommendation that, let's say you had your second dose, then you get infected with COVID, which happened actually to many people, especially with Omicron, that you wait 2 to 3 months after that infection before getting your booster dose. Why? You probably have some immunity built up from the infection itself. And then also, because of that immunity boost from the infection, your risk of side effects, even just fever, fatigue, sore muscles, like we talked about before, might be a bit higher. That being said, in practice, I would never turn anybody away if they showed up, they're fully recovered from their COVID infection, they're not isolating anymore, their symptoms are all gone, it's been 3 weeks or a month, and they're ready to get their booster. The benefits of giving them the shot right then and there, like after informed consent, outweigh the risk of turning them away and hoping that they'll come back for the booster shot. So there's a recommendation, but it's not a requirement. So if you want to get your booster shot as soon as you're fully recovered, you no longer have any symptoms, that is certainly possible. And, you know, in First Nation communities, it's more our recommendation to do it at the time of presentation. Now, in terms of the question, is the pandemic actually over and are we in an endemic phase? I would say we don't have a common understanding of what endemic means, right? Hi, Tobasonaquit.
Oh, a new addition to the night here.
Yeah, and so like Dr. Giroux mentioned, we are going to continue to see either new subvariants, so BA2 is a subvariant of the Omicron variant, or new variants. And those will cause different size waves, which is hard to predict. And we're actually already starting to see some of this around the world. So China has locked down some cities or regions again because of the increase in COVID cases. The EU is reporting an increase in cases in several different countries. So undoubtedly that will also happen in the United States and then in Canada, right? Part of the shift that we're trying to make to go from a pandemic approach to a more sustainable endemic approach is not to use public health laws and restrictions so much, and to focus more on the prevention of severe outcomes. So like Dr. Giroux mentioned, being ready with as much immunity as possible, both individually and collectively, with high vaccine coverage, with more people having their booster doses done, will help us get ready for that. We also have new treatments available to prevent the progression or the movement of people from mild symptoms to more severe symptoms requiring hospital care. And so a lot of focus on those tools, but I think it's really important we keep in mind, you know, the opportunities we have collectively to keep risk lower by continuing to wear masks, for example, in indoor public places where there's a law that says we have to or not, staying home when we have any symptoms that might be COVID, and if you might be eligible for treatment, getting tested and finding out how to access that treatment as quickly as possible. And, you know, one of the things I look forward to most about trying to make this transition from a pandemic approach to an endemic approach is the opportunity to reconnect with land, with ceremonies, with other connections like Ed mentioned, so that we can kind of have that more balanced life again, really.
Miigwech for that. Dr. Monkman, you have a video question here.
Hi, I'm Jewel, and I just had a question about the differences between Pfizer and Moderna. A lot of people around my age, and myself included, were asked to get Moderna for their third dose, just due to the Pfizer shortage. I was wondering what the differences between the two brands are, and if there are any side effects to mixing Pfizer and Moderna.
Okay, Miigwech for the question. So both the Pfizer and Moderna mRNA vaccines work in basically the same way to trigger an immune response. So they are effectively and safe to mix or interchange. So if you've had Pfizer, Moderna, or even AstraZeneca for your first dose, it's safe and effective to have either mRNA vaccine for the next one. Sometimes I get asked questions about a rare condition or side effect of the vaccine called myocarditis, or inflammation around the heart. So it's important to really remember that this was exceedingly rare, mild, and most people recovered very quickly. And we found that over time, the myocarditis occurred more often with Moderna than with Pfizer. So for people under age 30, we do recommend that you receive Pfizer, but if it's not available, Moderna is still much safer than not being vaccinated. And then the other part of the question was side effects. So after getting vaccinated, it is very common to have normal and temporary side effects. They last a few hours to a few days, and sometimes not at all. And that is your body's natural immune response as it's working really hard to build protection against COVID-19. And so, yeah, I think that basically answers the question. Thank you.
Great. We're going to do, we've got a question for Ed, and then we're going to do a very fast, I'll call it a lightning round, just because we're running out of time, and we want to make sure as many questions as possible can get addressed. So, but Ed, I want to ask you a question here. So many of our relatives and members of our communities, and those in our workplaces, Indigenous, non-Indigenous peoples, there is a great deal of information or opinions. People have a whole bunch of different feelings around vaccines, and oftentimes some negative feelings around vaccines. What is the best way to have these conversations? Is there a good sort of advice that you can give to our people in different ways? Is it compassion? Is it curiosity? What's the best way to have productive conversations around vaccines, particularly if it's a family member and they feel very strongly they don't want to, but they you heard information tonight to say we really want to have a hard conversation around vaccines in our family? I think you're muted. You just got to unmute yourself, Ed. Oh,
there we go. Thank you for that question again, Yigan. Yeah, either or, compassion or curiosity. I'm not a big fan of either. I'm not a big fan of either or kind of circumstances. I think depending on the situation, one will work better than the other. So there's no one answer that will, it's not compassion over curiosity or vice versa. You've got to use your best judgment in approaching this circumstance. If I was to make a hard choice, it would be compassion, though, because as Sylvia McAdam noted, she's a noted scholar in Saskatchewan, and really well connected with her ancestral roots and ancestral teachings. She talks about pipe laws, and one of the 7 pipe laws she mentions is compassion. Compassion would be a more favored approach for me than curiosity, but it would not discount curiosity. That's what I'm saying. Curiosity would work with the children. Myself, I I like to create, I like to cause my grandchildren to think. So I'm very indirect in talking with children. I try to make them use their minds, and we'll tell them long stories to stir their curiosity and to stir their imagination. But I will always do it in a compassionate way. So I don't know if I've really answered the question. I prefer compassion, but I would also encourage the use of curiosity as well.
Miigwech, Ed, for that. I mean, you know, so much of our people are based in kindness and generosity, but not passivity, right? Like not weakness, just
Exactly.
being honest
Exactly.
and speaking with each other, but offering those gifts, you know, like listening twice as much as you speak, as my uncle says, you know, that we need to listen to each other. Even if sometimes we radically disagree with each other, we need to listen twice as much.
Precisely.
Now, when I'm on the CBC Power Panel, I'm going to bring something here. You know, we have a time clock, which is the 30-second time clock. Now, you're all being, you know, good, respectful people, but right now I'm giving you the 30-second time clock. I'm going to come in and interrupt you. You know, don't think you all, because you're all smart and everything and you've got all these degrees and stuff, that you can just keep talking all night. All right, so got to be concise. Lightning round. These are from viewers. And the first question is for you, Dr. Giroux. There's lots of concerns out there of the adverse effects of vaccines on children. You've already addressed a little bit of this, but specifically there is concerns around brain development. There's been a lot of information around the impact of vaccine on brains. What is the impact that, as far as you know, of the COVID-19 vaccines on brain development, and do the benefits outweigh any risks?
Great. Okay, this is the 30 seconds. So we've talked a lot about side effects. Right now, there's no known effects on brain development in children. However, for children who do get COVID-19 and develop serious consequences, that can affect their brain development quite significantly. So again, we talk about weighing the risk of the vaccine versus weighing the risk of getting infected. I think that's one thing. The second thing is, you know, for development, we do have to think about things long-term. And a lot of people ask me, you know, what is the long-term effects? We've had lots of studies on coronavirus vaccines for 20 years, but as Dr. Anderson has said, we've had nearly 13 billion doses given around the world. In terms of long-term side effects, we expect that the majority of side effects in general take place within the first days to weeks of receiving a vaccine, and certainly would be incredibly rare for something to last longer than 6 months to a year. So now we are at the point where we've been giving these vaccines for quite some time, and we would know most of the long-term side effects. Certainly, I can say in my practice, I haven't had any patients who've had long-term side effects from in terms of their brain development, but is something that continues to be monitored. Although I wouldn't expect that to be the case. Is that 30 seconds?
That was pretty good. I feel bad for our closed captioners. You spoke so fast.
I'm sorry.
A lot of information in that 30 seconds. And, honestly, there was just there is a lot of information regarding the brain and related to vaccines. It's very comforting to hear a physician who knows talking about the fact that there's a huge, much bigger risk when it comes to the getting COVID itself. And particularly as someone who has COVID running through our family, I've seen firsthand the impact of the infection on our brains. And okay, Dr. Anderson, here is your lightning round question. How long after COVID-19 would I have natural immunity if I'm unvaccinated?
It is a great question. And I want to say we don't know the answer to this for sure. And in part because it's different with different variants, right? And so, for example, there is some new evidence or new data being put out there that infection with Omicron will not necessarily protect you from infection with future variants because of the high number of mutations and different factors like that. In general, I would say maybe around 3 months is what a lot of the data suggests, and then it starts to wane off. And that's why we want to get that vaccine series started as soon as you're recovered and ready, because that series of vaccines help build the longer lasting immunity.
Dr. Giroux needs to go to the Dr. Anderson, speaking clearly for the 30 seconds and not racing like crazy. Dr. Giroux, you need to step up here.
I'll do what I can.
Maybe my
I'm just
question was a bit simpler. Give him the benefit of the.
Okay, Dr. Monkman, your 30 seconds will begin in just a second here. We're hearing lots of information right now, even today. There was discussion today around Pfizer seeking permission from, I believe, the Canadian government or the US government, I'm not sure what the story said, around another dose of the vaccine, another booster shot. Will we need more than 3 doses of vaccination?
So in short, probably. In Manitoba, we recommend 4 doses if you're immunocompromised. And so it's a little bit too early for us to say for certain if more doses will be recommended, but based on how we have seen that this virus is able to change itself over time and create new variants, it's very likely that we will need to have occasional boosters similar to the annual flu vaccine.
Okay, you both need to go to the Dr. Monkman School of quick answers here. Now, Ed has come in from outside, which, by the way, proof that the beautiful weather here in Treaty 1 territory, because, you're able to go outside and answer your question outside. Surprised you didn't have shorts on, you know what I mean? It's beautiful out there. Ed, your question is your very fast question here is, what can we learn from COVID-19? And what can we learn about the ways in which it's challenged our communities, but also some of the beautiful parts of our communities? And you get the biggest question and the shortest amount of time. So you got to unmute yourself.
Okay.
But your clock's still ticking. Okay.
Okay. Biggest thing. Well, how we educate our communities. I love the pop-up tents that went around, the vaccines that were going around. I love the information sessions that were put out by our health leaders, Dr. Anderson, our leadership, the stuff in the communities where our chiefs and our leaders were given updates, just keeping the people apprised of what's going on with COVID in the community. I love some of the media that kicked out during this time. There was one kakagil, that's a raven in our language, that was going around. Well, he was a puppet that was used to educate our community members on COVID. So there's a lot of good takeaways from this COVID pandemic. The way the communities came together and supported one another. What do you call the check stations? The check stops when our communities went into lockdown, and how well those were managed by our health personnel and our local constabulary. I hope I said that right. It seems that anything that gets thrown at us as Indigenous people, we are resilient as hell. Look at everything that's happened to us over our period of colonization. We're still here. COVID, I'm sure it's going to mutate again. Dr. Anderson spoke about that. We're not out of the woods yet, but I think the compassion is going to help, is going to carry us.
Let's just very quickly, in just one sentence or less, Dr. Giroux, what's one thing that you think is a teaching from this? What have we learned from COVID-19 in this past very difficult 2 years in our communities? What's one thing, if you could sum it up in a sentence, of something that you've learned about our people or about what we've learned from this sickness? What will be remembered? What is something you've learned?
Great question. I think in one sentence, I would summarize it as that we have the expertise and we have the knowledge and we have the medicines within our communities in order to take care of ourselves and keep ourselves healthy. I think that's the thing that I've really noticed, especially with seeing the Indigenous-led responses for COVID. And I'm really excited to kind of use that momentum to continue to shift our healthcare system.
Dr. Anderson, what's one thing that we've learned during this time? And, you know, you've been at the front line of just so much in this. I mean, just miigwech to you for carrying so much for all of us. I've sent you messages personally on their own. Just what is one thing you've learned during all of your time, not just, you know, dealing with the sickness, but also in the public eye? What are something that you've learned during all this time?
So first of all, completely agree with Ryan's. I'll build on that and add, and maybe I'll just say one of the things I found most personally rewarding was working with other Indigenous leaders, and in particular, traditional healers and knowledge keepers. And so how much we have been able to work together in support of our communities, and really highlight how beneficial that is to our own health, but then also to the broader society's health.
Dr. Monkman, you've put on a lot of miles moving around and going to the front lines of our communities. You've seen things right on the ground there. What's one thing that you've learned during this pandemic for all of us?
The importance of our human connection with one another, absolutely. In addition, I want to echo support and agreement for everyone else's comments as well. You know, we were never meant to be in isolation or alone. And I feel like it's this pandemic has absolutely made me appreciate people that I may have taken for granted in the past. For example, you know, the importance of valuing the time spent one-on-one with people in person when you are able. Absolutely.
What a great night. Big miigwech to all of your knowledge and your gifts and your kindness to our communities and to our fellow panelists and to myself and to my family. My daughter's been watching, and so it's so amazing, first off, to see Indigenous physicians. It's really amazing to see powerful, strong Anishinaabe Kwe and, you know, our relatives who are aunties, you know, just big miigwech to all of you for just your gifts for tonight. Before we get to our final words, which will be offered by Ed for tonight, we hope that you take a minute to share some feedback of what you thought of tonight's event. At the end, you'll be prompted to respond to a brief post-event survey. We're offering a special giveaway. So a giveaway to the first 3 people who complete it. You get to go and hang out on Ed's deck with him outside. That's the prize. Okay, sorry. No, there's actually more than that. But for the first 3 that fill out the survey, there is a prize for you. It's really helpful if you can fill out the survey so you can help us plan events at Mamawe Wichita, as well as all the different things that we're doing for in the community to try to spread information about COVID-19 and vaccines. And so what I'd like to do is offer Ed an opportunity to close us off for tonight and offer a finishing words to bring our circle to a close. A big miigwech to you, Ed, for being our knowledge keeper for tonight. And it is so important whenever we do events talking about what can be at times emotional information, sometimes divisive, that we bring a knowledge keeper in, such as yourself, to give us a real sensibility and remind us of the importance of protocols and practices of respect and kindness. So Ed, if you can close off our circle for tonight.
Oh, Nigan, you did a great job. You did a great job. Herding cats is like. But I want to start off by saying that the Winnipeg Jets are leading 2-0 here in Winnipeg. And the night is going really great. So, nutawinan, asamina, ipenanaskumwan, ipenanaskum nutawinan. Gigipetok, isigaki, ito ay check niwak komagan, niwak komagan, koma aksiwen, kapmuteme kanuta, misiwes kami. Mitset ay sino, igipepag skagutsik, nutawinan, Moi gats niistä kikatep na skumten. Iniku kaki pesuemi ak nutsuma kaki sega kati otagu siko. Minäkin ajattuisikin haganak nuutawinan. Nuukom naan, ei, se on so, kokom no. Nuutawinan, puutautse. So ei himmenan, sapa pegoag. Kaagano, kagi takuhteetse kohta. Kagi pentuuttahiak. Ama kuutawinan. Tegivat, että maassutsek minukea vaan huutautse. Ei maakan nuutawinan. Eiku taiskumaaga pitämään. Niminen askumaavak minä kiertoske haganak. Nimot soomtek. Maamustu haganak. Nän askum tohuk. Noko, kiista. Kaagano kiinao. Missä veskami kautta piek. Hei, meitä tokok. Niwa komaagan nana. Peetsi hotana. Sitä me maagan. Nän askum tokok. Hei, meitä. Meitä. Hei, meitä. Hekusse maakwa. Hei, mutta. Hei. Hekusse. That's it. Thank you.
Miigwech to everybody for coming tonight. In our language, when we finish off something, we say miigwech, but miigwech doesn't mean thank you. It means that we will take the knowledge that you have given to us and we will give it on. So miigwe is the verb. So miigwech to all of you. We will take that knowledge and we will travel in our different directions. A big kanigana to all of you. Miigwech to all of you for coming for tonight, particularly our panelists, but for all of you. Go and take care of your family tonight, and let's all pray for the Jets, as Ed has directed us to do. Okay, so miigwech, everybody. Take good care of yourself. We will see you all soon. So kiga wadman minawa, everybody.